For the past 6 months, I have kept the box to our Breville Smart Oven Air Fryer Pro in the closet under our stairs. That might sound extreme to some people, but we have had such a poor track record with appliances recently that I wanted to make sure that I had the box in case we had to send it back. But today, my friends, today is the day that I get to throw this box in the garbage, and I could not be more excited. In these 6 months, I have had ample opportunity to put this baby to the test with all kinds of baked goods. I've compiled everything into a pretty extensive list of pros and cons so that you'll know if this toaster oven is suitable for your needs. I've also included some easy tips called ways to upgrade for you to get the most out of this oven, depending on the settings you think you would use the most. And I'm going to start out of order by sharing the areas of improvement first. If you are seriously considering purchasing this toaster oven, I would hate for you to watch this entire video falling more and more in love with it after each positive aspect, and then realize at the first shortcoming that this oven will not work out for you after all and be right back at square one with all of your research. I appreciate you choosing this video over or in addition to others, and I want to do my best to respect your time. I'll preface the improvements by saying I do truly love this toaster oven. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find another toaster oven out there at the same price point that has the same even heating, the same cubic feet inside, and the same reliability. However, in the past 6 months, there have been quite a few things I've noted that I think you should consider before purchasing the Breville Smart Oven Air Fryer Pro. Starting with the most serious, the breaker trippage. The second time I used this toaster oven, it tripped a breaker midway through baking and completely shut off. I can't recall if there was a warning beep, but I looked over from stirring my pasta and noticed that the LCD screen was completely off and my meatballs still looked suspiciously frozen for the amount of time that they had been in. There was nothing else plugged into the entire breaker, and our house was built 2 years ago to California standards, so I can tell you that the problem was likely not our house's fault. That was the major reason I kept the box this whole time, because I was worried that it was going to be an ongoing issue, but fortunately we have had no issues since. And I have done everything I can to replicate it by cooking the same meatballs with or without aluminum foil, on a different rack, on the same rack, using a different protein, cooking things low and slow, cooking things hot and fast. It has not tripped the breaker since. From what I have researched since then, breaker trippage is a very common issue with Breville toaster ovens. If your electrical is already a little bit iffy, I would say pass, or hire an electrician to do a once-over on the outlet and your breaker box just to make sure everything is running smoothly. I still unplug it every time we go on vacation just to be safe, but that has been the worst of it. The next 3 improvements are really just inconveniences rather than safety concerns, which is why I still wholeheartedly recommend this toaster oven. The toast and bagel presets. My biggest complaint is that the bagel and toast functions are wildly inaccurate and they take a long time to toast. I'm not much of a morning person as it is, and I tend to get really nauseated if I don't eat something right away. So those few minutes are very precious to me, and it's a huge disappointment that it takes so long. You set the toastiness level and you turn the dial to your number of toast, and then it figures out the time that it will take to get to your desired toast. In the last 6 months, I have had a bagel or toast on average 3 times a week, and the only time that it has been accurate is if I have preheated the oven in advance. Fresh in the morning, I have to set the dial to the second darkest setting, double the number of pieces I have, and wait almost 8 minutes to get a lightly browned piece of toast. That is just ridiculous to me. So if you rely on quick toast or prefer almost burnt toast, I would recommend getting a separate toaster for your toast. Fortunately, Breville also sells toasters, so instead of conveniently consolidating 2 appliances into one called a toaster oven, you can buy a separate toaster for $100 and then have 2 appliances taking up space on your countertop. I'm not sure that was their intent, but it is a great way for them to sell 2 products when just one would do. Condensation. The manual says that high moisture foods can result in condensation dripping down onto your countertops. I read that information in the manual before I even started using the toaster oven, and I get that. That makes a lot of sense, but there are 2 reasons why this bothers me. Number 1, if it was just water, that would be an entirely different story. But the water that leaks out is tinged with brown because it picks up the residue on the sides of the oven and the oven door. So instead of just water on my countertop, I get this really gross looking brown splotch on 2 sides of my oven, probably once a week. Now, part of that could just be because I need to clean the inside of my oven more. I get that. Everyone could probably clean the inside of their oven more, and I show you how to do it at the end of the video. And the second reason this bothers me is because the condensation that collects along the oven door runs down and runs alongside the seam on the crumb tray. But instead of running into the crumb tray where I could easily remove it and it could be collected, it just drips directly onto my counter. And I get that the moisture has to escape somewhere and that it probably wouldn't be the most efficient way, but it would be a lot more convenient if that water condensed at the bottom of the crumb tray and I could easily pull it out instead of it just dripping directly onto my countertops. This is especially annoying when using the dehydrate function because the sole function is to remove excess moisture from these foods. There is a lot of water that comes out of these foods that has nowhere to go except for your countertop. I dehydrated some pineapple slices, which granted are a very high moisture fruit, but I had puddles underneath the toaster oven. And it got to a point where I just put a big towel underneath because I was tired of mopping up the puddles on my counter every hour. And when you're dehydrating something for like 12 hours, especially if you're dehydrating something overnight, you want to be able to plan for that in advance. In practice, with normal use, aside from the dehydrate function, I really only have to clean those two little spots on my counter maybe once a week. They're dime sized and I could really only see them because I have very light quartz countertops that I have a video on if you're interested. If you have darker stone, you're probably not going to see it, and I haven't noticed it harming the countertops in any way. Believe me, I have checked. But it is one more thing that I have to add to my deep cleaning kitchen list, and it's a good thing to keep in mind. The noise. For the plain oven and convection settings, I was pleasantly surprised by just how quiet it is. I wasn't expecting complete silence because that's just unrealistic, but I also was thinking it might be something similar to my microwave range hood, which I think is just a little bit too loud, and it is much quieter than that. What my husband doesn't like is that the cool down process is just as noisy as when the oven is on. After taking out the pan and shutting the oven door, the fan stays on to facilitate the cool down process. And this can take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes depending on how hot the temperature was and if you leave the oven door open. And this happens with the oven door open or shut, so there's not really an easy way around it. It does take considerably less time with the oven door open, but it's also a lot louder. So there's a give and a take there. It doesn't bother me too much, but it is something to note. Those are all of the areas of improvement I can give. Like I said, they're really not terrible, but they definitely are things that you'll want to consider, especially if you live somewhere with known electrical issues. Now let's get on to the pros. Interior size. This is one of the things that I considered heavily before purchasing and is well worth the upgrade over the Breville Smart Oven alone. The Breville Smart Oven Air Fryer Pro fits pans up to 16 inches, which is your standard muffin pan, your standard donut pan, your standard Madeleine pan, your standard jelly roll pan, quarter sheet pans, even smaller Dutch ovens. The way that I see it, you are saving over $100 by using the pans that you already have rather than purchasing smaller sizes that will fit in a smaller oven. Presets. The way the oven is set up, you rotate the selection dial to your preferred bake method and change the time and temperature accordingly. Something like the proof setting will always be at 100 degrees Fahrenheit and 1 hour, and something like cookies will be at 375 and 12-ish minutes. Knowing that, it's really easy to jump around to the temperature you need without having to change the temperature or time dials too much. And it remembers the last settings you used for each preset. So let's say you had a big baking day, you were making bread and you turned the dial to proof where it was at 100 degrees and 1 hour. Then you took the bread out, changed the selection dial to bake and turned it to 350 for 30 minutes. Baked your bread, and then decided to roast some veggies and turned your selection dial to the roast option. When you need to proof bread the next time, you turn that dial to the proof and it will automatically be set at 100 degrees and 1 hour. It's really convenient. Dial settings. The dials are very convenient. It's fairly quick to change the temperature and time, and especially in smaller increments. There have been a couple times I've wished they've gone a little bit faster if I'm going from a 15-minute bake to a 75-minute bake, but I've thought that maybe twice in all of my use. The bake preset. As I mentioned before, the Breville Smart Oven Air Fryer Pro has superior even heating. Bake times are always accurate. I have baked 2 trays of food in there at one time with no issues, and I can even bake 3-layer cakes on one rack and have perfectly brown tops without having to rotate or open the oven door once. Absolutely incredible. I will say I haven't been able to bake 2 trays of macarons at a time in it, but it is very rare to find an oven that can do it, and I'm not counting it against it in any way. I recommend purchasing jelly roll pans. These are a little less common and a little smaller than half sheet pans, but they fit perfectly inside of the toaster oven, and you can fit a ton more food on them than quarter sheet pans. As an example, I would have to bake probably 7 trays of macarons on quarter sheet pans, but I can get away with just 4 using my jelly roll pans. They are a huge help. The Dehydrate Preset. A couple times I have used the dehydrate setting, it's worked pretty well. It was a little bit much for the pineapple slices, but I think that's just standard for a high moisture food. I use it most frequently to defrost mozzarella and pizza dough if I haven't taken it out earlier in the day, and it does a great job to thaw everything in about an hour. I would recommend purchasing at least 1 more air fry / dehydrate basket. You can't fit much in one basket, especially because you have to fit everything in a single layer, but you can easily fit 2 of these in the oven at once. And it would go a long way to make running your oven for 13 hours worth it if you ended up with 2 trays of dehydrated food as opposed to just 1. The Airfry Preset. I'm not an air fryer fanatic, so I haven't tested the air fry setting quite as extensively as the others, but I will say that the few times I have used it for hash browns, tater tots, and french fries have all turned out really crispy and delicious food. I kind of thought that I would turn more into an air fryer kind of gal with this, but it just hasn't happened yet. I would recommend purchasing another basket if you plan to air fry a lot of your food or if you have a larger family. You can easily fit 2 of these baskets in there and the oven will still crisp everything perfectly. The pizza preset. For making fresh homemade pizza, the included pizza pan is just not it. For reheating, it performed really well and gave me a really nice crisp crust. So if you're looking for mostly frozen pizza, I think this would do a pretty good job. If you're looking to make homemade pizza, it just made really swimmy crusts that didn't hold up. All of these ways to upgrade are completely optional, but I would say a pizza stone is almost necessary for really good, crisp, homemade pizza every single time. I have a full video talking about how to get really good, crispy, thin crust pizza at home, and all of those same tips apply if you use a pizza stone in your Breville toaster oven. Miscellaneous helpful features. When I started looking through the manual, there were quite a few features that I was excited about, but I've got to say that the door sensor has been really helpful. Anytime you open the door from baking, the timer will pause until you close the oven door again. It's a really nice attention to detail that I find a lot of other ovens have overlooked. I also really appreciate the rotate remind feature, which doesn't just remind you to rotate the pans halfway, but figures out the best time for you to rotate pans because it takes into consideration the amount of time that it will take for the pan to heat up before the bottom starts cooking. So it's usually closer to 2/3 of the bake time, but that results in a better, more even cook. I also really appreciate the 8 different rack positions. I can fit 2 trays at a time pretty easily, or I can put something on the bottom tray that's taller, like a Dutch oven, and I have plenty of room to fit it. I thought that I was going to use the auto eject rack more than I do, but I've noticed myself gravitating more towards the ones that don't have it. When using it in position 4, it's great because there's a back to the rack and it prevents the tray from falling into the oven, but I have noticed that if you are using it on level 3, it gets a little bit dicey if your thumb pushes the tray back because there's nothing to catch the tray and it can go into the back of the oven. I haven't had it happen yet, but that scared me a little bit, so I haven't used it quite as much. And like I mentioned in the unboxing video, the volume level is a nice attention to detail. Over the last 6 months, I have had the opportunity to test every single preset except for the slow cook function. I would imagine it works in a very similar way to the dehydrate or the proof function, but I haven't personally tested it yet. And lastly, I have had a number of questions about the reliability of the Breville in my unboxing video. Other than the breaker tripping the second time I used it, this oven has performed flawlessly. And I say this fully expecting to have received a faulty appliance because we went through 4 fridges before we got a good one. And even this one didn't come with the fan required to make ice. So we've been around the block with faulty appliances. I fully expected to get one that I was going to have to send back in, and that did not happen. I know that there are concerns about the glass door shattering or a constant tone being emitted or further internal electrical issues or contacting customer service being less than ideal, but I have not experienced any of these issues. I'm recommending the oven that I have, and if this is the oven that you were to get, I would say get it 100% every single time. I wish you all the best in your hunt for the toaster oven of your dreams, and if you think that it might be the Breville Smart Oven Air Fryer Pro, I would so appreciate it if you purchased it at the affiliate link in the description. It goes a long way to help support my channel, along with giving this video a big thumbs up. My name is Alyssa. I am the recipe developer and food blogger behind the Floral Apron, so if you like good recipes, pretty food, and all-around kitchen content, please consider subscribing as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye! One of the things that makes my blog different is I always include a video or photo of the dirty dishes at the end of each recipe, and the same goes for appliances. I'm using a lightly damp cloth here to get any dust off of the exterior of the oven before removing any pans or trays that I have inside of it, along with the wire racks to go directly into the sink to get scrubbed with soap and water. I add glass cleaner to a new rag and then clean the inside of the glass door until it's shiny and looks presentable again. Then I remove the crumb tray to make cleaning those two little spots on my counter just a little bit easier. They come off with a light wipe, but again, something to keep in mind while you're doing your deep kitchen cleaning. And then I use a sponge that has just the tiniest bit of soap and water on it to wipe the interior of the oven. That gets off any excess residue, usually oil that comes off during baking. Then I dry it all with a clean cloth before scrubbing the crumb tray and wire racks to the best of my ability with soap and water in the sink. You can see the crumb tray has quite a bit of discoloration from all the oil that has dripped onto it over time, but it's a crumb tray, it's fine. Then I scrub the wire racks, the tops and bottoms, because the bottom is usually where I see a lot of that baking residue collect. I'm really quite impressed with these. I toast my toast directly on top of them and was expecting more discoloration overall, especially after 6 whole months, but any staining comes off pretty easily with just a little bit of extra scrubbing. I actually missed a little bit on this one, but I'll get it next time. Then I scrub my roasting pan the exact same way. I usually line this pan with aluminum foil, so it's prevented me from having to clean it too much. There's a little bit of discoloration in the corners, but it's not too big of a deal. And then look at these racks. They look almost as good as the day that I got them, and they still fit in super nicely, slide in really easily. The next rack is the one with a little bit of staining on it, and that again comes off with a little bit of excess scrubbing. Overall, this whole deep cleaning of the oven took me about 15 minutes to do, which is not bad in terms of cleaning an entire oven. It's also a lot easier to get into than a regular size oven as well. Thank you again so much for watching. I hope this video has been helpful to you in some way. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about this oven in the comments, and if you've made it this far, I hope you have a great day.